Welcome to Unveiled Radiance, podcast to help you strip away fear of aging. Hello, I'm Dr. Natalia, licensed naturopathic physician, aesthetic expert injector, and owner of Bloom Skincare. In each episode, we will discuss everything about skincare, strip away confusion about aesthetic medicine, and help you deeply understand what happens in your body as you start aging. We will invite expert opinion and, of course, science-backed information to help you deeply understand you. This podcast is part of an educational platform called Unveiled You, which I designed for women just like you to help you understand everything, not just about your skin, which is your largest body's organ, but everything that's happened to your body from puberty all the way through past menopause, and enjoy and embrace every stage of that beautiful life. Let's get started. I am Natalia Borokovsky, and welcome to Unveiled Radiance. Hello, our dear listeners. This is Unveiled Radiance podcast, and this episode it's something our listeners have been really looking forward to. We are going to talk about confidence, and specifically chemistry of the confidence and this mysterious neurotransmitter, a chemical called dopamine. And here in the studio, I have with me Dr. Richard Harig. He is a psychologist with over 40 years of clinical experience, and now he is transformative coach. He's writing a book, and he is a brilliant mind we cannot wait to dig into. So before we get into this whole dopamine conversation, because I am very excited, I read the document you shared with me about how much dopamine really does to our bodies. It goes far beyond being a pleasure molecule. Let's talk about confidence in general. So I think there's a big misconception about confidence because most of us do believe confidence is something we're born with. And perhaps some of it is a little true, don't you agree? Like some children tend to be bolder than others and be less fearful. They kind of create more of that bolder, outgoing choices in their life. But is it true? Are we stuck with our confidence, or we can do something about it?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Doctor. We're born with a temperament. A temperament is just a probability of acting in a certain kind of direction. But there's a long time from being born until we're adults. And so we reach that point at some point. I don't want to get too technical. It's called the epigenetic landscape model. But it says we start with a certain genetic package and we're influenced by all the things that happen to us, all the things that are said to us, the events of our life, and then what we think about ourselves and the repetitive thoughts that we have. And so you're absolutely right. There's something called neuroplasticity, and it says at any age we can modify that and change.
Yeah, I know. And you shared this really fantastic story that was written by plastic surgeon Dr. Maltz, right? What he observed and his patients. So can you kind of tell our listeners about this?
Well, I'm glad to do that because what he discovered empirically through his research and his clinical observations has now been validated by the latest neuroscience research. And so we knew about what he had done and what he had talked about in his books, but now we know why, it turns out. And so his story is he would work on creating a perfect appearance, reconstructive surgery or cosmetic surgery, and the person would be by objective standards beautiful, but inside they felt like they had the same deformity or they had the same ugly appearance. And you know, we have a psychological disorder called body dysmorphic disorder.
Yes, absolutely. And this is such a difficult topic. And one of the reasons why I created my platform, Unveil You, because I see it in my aesthetic practice, unfortunately, nearly daily. Beautiful women that all they see in the mirror and their reflection is sort of an array of imperfections instead of really seeing the true face. So I think it's very important for us to bring awareness
And I think most women specifically, some men, of course, as well, but more so women, we are really, unfortunately, sensitive to that matter because most of us see that our worth is equal to our external appearance. And I think that's why that body dysmorphia or that anxiety with your own reflection develops. And what I see in my patients that not necessarily they are at the point of true body dysmorphia. They're not at the level when they need some clinical help. They not necessarily need to go see a therapist, but they have that evidence of experiencing anxiety every time they see their reflection in the mirror. It doesn't matter how much we try as aesthetic providers to fix what they see as imperfections. The imperfections are really truly lie beyond that external appearance. So if we see it in such a prevalent thing happening in our society, how do we help those women? How do we help them to first become aware without being critical or label them as sick people, for example?
Well, the first step in any process such as that is instilling of hope, and the second is instilling of meaning. And with hope, the person begins to actually produce additional dopamine, which is sometimes called the motivational molecule. That
Mhm.
without that, we kind of are stuck, and we call that a stuck point. And I can't get past it. And once something changes, and we begin to believe, if I do something different, I can change. The next part of that then is beginning to ask the question, well, how do I change? What do I do?
That's a brilliant advice. I think it's wonderful to give people this notion that there is hope. Whatever confidence or lack of they experiencing now, it's not something they stuck with. So if they are ready to change, like you mentioned, there is a neuroplasticity. Our brain is still living entity. We can change it by giving it a little bit of a different script, right?
Absolutely. And I'm so excited because for the first time we have imaging that can actually show changes in the activity of certain brain circuits and changes in size in certain areas of the brain. And so neuroplasticity is a thing. You can see it happen.
I know you talk about our self image to be in sort of our brain's blueprint. So, can you expand on that? Like, what do you mean by that term?
Well, we tend to organize perceptions. So if you could look at perceptions at a microscopic level, and then that's kind of what happens as you talk about someone, looks in a mirror and they don't see the gestalt, they don't see the whole. They see, oh, there's a blemish here. Oh, there's one side's not quite like the other side there, and they don't organize that very well. And so what happens is within certain regions of the brain, typically about the midbrain going left to right, is a motor strip, a sensory strip, and the information from those areas helps us create this roadmap of ourselves. It's how our body knows where everything is. Well, that's equally
Mhm.
true in the brain. And when connections are repetitive, that connection gets stronger and stronger and more active.
So, essentially, if ones have sort of a toxic expressions of themselves and they're stuck with that image internally in their brain, unless they take an effort to rewrite the script, they will get stuck with that blueprint in a way, right? So
Exactly.
that's what you, yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying the more times, and you probably have seen this in real life, the expression, people will believe anything if they hear it often enough.
Yes.
And it's true. When you look at advertising, it's repeated, 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 repeated. And the
Hmm.
underlying message of that advertising is you're not naturally attractive enough. You need our product to be more attractive or
Yes.
whatever. And
Yes.
people begin to incorporate, oh, I'm not naturally that attractive. And,
Absolutely.
and yet the research seems to show attractiveness is more or as much about the internal beliefs a person has, the extent to which they're not concerned about themselves, they're concerned about other people.
Hmm.
They're open to experience. They're happy in the world, happy in their own skin. They have meaning in their life, and all those things make people charismatic and magnetic and attractive.
I cannot agree more with you. And one of the things that I really don't like about the industry I am part of, the cosmetic industry, aesthetic medicine, plastic surgery, it tends to really feed off of insecurities and fears of women. You know, we all naturally want to be more attractive. So that's, again, it gives us more of a level of empowerment in the way to feeling youthful and attractive. But when we constantly getting the messages that you're not enough, you need this to fix it, you're not enough, you need that, the next step to feel better. So that's fear-based marketing. It's something I really, really have a hard time with. And conversations like this are so important to help women specifically understand that their attractiveness truly comes with the human connections. It's more so the connection, kind connection to yourself. So once you internally feel attractive, everything else fall into place, and it's just so much easier from there. So now let's kind of like shift gears and talk about dopamine itself, because there's just so much information about dopamine. And what most readers and myself, even I would admit, sometimes think about the dopamine as of like this miracle happy molecule. Like the more dopamine you have, then the happier you are. So how would you explain that?
Well, I guess I would start with discussing what a neurotransmitter is. Sometimes we think of neurons like wires that conduct electricity, and that's not a good way to look at it because the nerve pathway consists of so many very short neurons that each one has its own power supply. So it's constantly pumping electrons out into the environment, and like with a car battery getting charged, the more electrons, which have an electrical charge of -1, are pumped out, the stronger the charge is. Now there's a programming language at the neuron level. And this is metaphoric, this isn't neuroscience, but it's as if it says, if 75% of the receptors are filled with a neurotransmitter, then fire. If not, then wait. And so the neurotransmitter is created in the end of the neuron, which is downward heading out with the signal from the brain. And it's stored in vesicles on the end of the axon. And so the molecule is stored there in a vesicle. And when that neuron fires, the neurotransmitter is expelled across the gap, filling the receptors on the downward side. So a dopamine molecule is a key. And when there are enough keys in the locks, then that next neuron fires. Now, the neurons that fire, yes, they go to parts of the brain that register a positive experience or a pleasure experience. But that's only a tiny part. I mean, we've known that for years, that it does. Oh, yeah, I got a jolt of dopamine from that positive experience.
Yes.
But the new neuroscience says dopamine is involved in many, many other areas. And we've known that. It's been a major player in say, diagnosis and treatment of Parkinson's.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that has nothing to do with pleasure. That's a totally different movement system. The brain really does process like a supercomputer. One of the things it calculates is the expectation of how much of a reward will I get for doing a certain action. And when we are in good balance with our environment, the normal activities of daily living are constantly giving us a little bit of dopamine, a little bit of dopamine. So if you had a scale of 0 being none and 100 being a lot, most of us live around 40 to 50 nanograms per deciliter, which is just a measurement. And if we have a particularly good day, we might go up to 70 or 80 and say, wow, this was an awesome day. And we have a peak experience, the best day of our life, the day we graduate from medical school or something maybe. Yes. Or if we're a sports person, we make a touchdown. Yes. Or anything like that. Maybe we get up to 100. But as our thoughts change, we make errors in predicting what's going to bring us the reward. And so the brain says, well, I'm not getting the reward I expected from this activity. I'm not going to do this as bad. And we see that person gradually then losing motivation, losing excitement, losing energy, losing the focus on the things in life that used to be important to them because they're not getting enough dopamine release. Now, that goes back to that interaction that we talked about. Somebody starting with a certain temperament, and then the events in life not rewarding them for being who they are, because the environment is saying you're not enough. You need to do this, or you need to do that, or you're too much of this or too much of that. And so
Right.
now we're not getting reward for being who we were or who we were created to be. And so as we're not getting that reward, we stop doing that. And so finally, we're just kind of moving through life. The joy is gone. It's like the color's gone out of the world. We're living in this dull, drab place, not having a vibrant one.
I get it. So, as you describing this reward, kind of like the surges of dopamine we get from different actions, the one thing that pops in my head right now, since I have teenagers and my daughter is 16, and as all 16-year-old girls, she is addicted to social media, which we are doing our best as parents to control, to minimize. But let's talk about the dopamine reward system because of the addiction to social media, because we know teenagers who will post something online and they get those hearts, likes, comments, positive comments, hopefully, on their images. They get that dopamine spike and it becomes so addicting. They just get so addicted to that constant urge of message, I'm interested, I'm wanted. And if they go through withdrawal, they tend to fall into more of a depression. So, how do we as parents address that dopamine social media addiction?
Well, I think it is sad but true. There's a generation, at least, from probably starting in the 21st century, where that is a very, very it's endemic. How do we do it for that generation? I'm not really sure. I mean, individuals who want to change can change, but for so many, you're absolutely right. The dopamine spike they get from a string of positive comments is way up, and the pain that they feel from hateful comments, you know, is way down. Um, Ideally, you know, and I'm parents would not let devices be babysitters.
Yes.
I'm in my own family. I remember vividly thinking, "Oh, how cute!" when I saw my youngest grandson running around in diapers with a tablet.
Hmm.
You know, he knew
Yeah.
how to work it before he could talk. Now you take that digital media away from him, and he's depressed.
Right, right. That's such a unfortunate reality we live in, and I think the best we can do as parents is to limit that exposure as much as possible. But ultimately, you cannot completely eliminate that social media exposure because we living in this digital age, our children will be exposed to it. So I think the best we can do is to teach them that those emotions are valid and how to learn to respond to them in a more of a positive way, because unfortunately also with that social media, when people leave nasty comments, it's easier to say something mean online that you typically don't say face to face, because it feels so like you're talking to an inanimate object, but the effect of it could be so profound on the other end, because again, that effect of dopamine that we get from those tiny little messages, either positive or negative. And as you were talking here about your confidence self point, how low dopamine can really change the way you perceive yourself and your self image. So it goes from your vicious cycle to the virtuous cycle. So I think that talk about the social media like really smoothly transitions into this topic. So, how would we help ourselves and our children to create more of that virtuous cycle of high confidence, not necessarily always high on dopamine, but at least stable dopamine levels?
Well, let me start then by talking about what a profound influence what parents do is compared to what parents say. And the problem that I see and have seen as a therapist is when one or more of the parents is constantly plugged into digital media.
Yeah.
And maybe I use stereotypes here, but dad gets home from work and then he goes to his game that he plays. Now he's got his headphones on, he's plugged into the game, and he is not being dad for his kids. He's not present. Well, where's mom? Mom, is on the couch on her phone on social media or doing games or something, and the kids are happily doing their digital stuff.
Hmm.
Well, how do they learn how to make that human connection and to get dopamine release from interacting with people? Whereas, a generation or two generations ago, oh, daddy's home, and they come running Well, now it's like, no, Dad, I'm busy. I'm on the tablet.
Yes, that's unfortunate reality for so many families, isn't it?
It is, unfortunately.
So that's ultimately we ourselves being withdrawn from social interactions. That's what really drives that vicious cycle of ultimately low self-esteem because of a lack of chemical, sincere connections between humans. Is that what you're trying to
I
say?
am saying that. I mean, we all know, about the value of physical contact in the form of a hug,
Hmm.
oxytocin being released,
Yes,
oxytocin
yes,
being a bonding chemical, and a
yes.
warm fuzzy chemical. And when we're interacting, as you point out, all we're seeing is one dimension, the visual dimension. Whereas in real life, there are odors. Someone has a particular set that they wear. Yeah, it's their trademark set. Or someone has a tone of voice. Well, the words in text don't convey that. You probably are
Hmm.
well aware that something less than 10% of the meaning of a message is in the actual words.
Yes.
Yeah, the rest is in tone of voice, speed with which it's spoken, volume,
Hmm.
eye contact, distance
Hmm.
between the people, stuff in kinesics, um, posture, bioenergetics, leaning in, leaning out, micro expressions. All that is lost in the digital connection. So
Absolutely. I think it's really important for people to understand very important point here that dopamine is a wonderful motivational happy neurotransmitter. However, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. So if we just rely on the dopamine spike looking at some kind of digital image, you're not getting full experience. Because when you're getting that social interaction with a living human being and you get all the other messages, like you said, the scent, the touch, the body language, the eye contact, you're getting a whole array of other positive molecules flooding your brain, and the experience are so much deeper, isn't it?
yes, it is. And actually, we have a special word for that. We call that reality. In the reality, we're not just an image on a screen. We're
Yes,
a three-dimensional being when we move.
yes,
Yeah. So,
yes, yes,
so we don't even experience the reality of one another digitally.
yes.
And then we add in filters that take our usual physical appearance, and then AI manipulates that to where we're beautiful.
Yes, yes. Which ultimately there's a it's a completely added depth to the topic of self-perception because if you're constantly hiding behind filters, your brain start to accept this as a normal image of you, and when you see yourself in reality of somebody taking a random photo or video, it sends such a flood of negative molecules and ultimately damages your self-esteem. So hiding behind, I mean, it's okay, I think, at some point to kind of play around with filters here and there. I mean, all of us had professional photo shoots when your image is, little altered, photoshopped to appear on some publication. But to do it every day, it really distorts our own message to our brain of who we are. And I think that's how it becomes sort of dangerous. And it really drives that vicious cycle of low self esteem as a result.
I really appreciate you bringing that up because I hadn't even thought of that till you just brought that up about the filtering. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to make sure that gets in the book.
Well, I'm happy to help. In my industry, I unfortunately see so many women struggle with this. And I always say it's really hard for beautiful women to age because beauty, youth becomes her identity for a really long time until she feels like it's fleeting. And it's important to have those conversations to really help women to embrace every age because age is truly a privilege and we kind of forget that it really is. And there's just so much more to beauty than external appearance. And at the same time, because I am a cosmetic provider, I'm not trying to urge women to age like they're sort of giving up on themselves, dropping a towel, don't take care of your skin and don't put on makeup. That's really not the point. The point is to still do things, but do it from the moment when it enriches you and empowers you. And it really helps you to maintain that positive image instead of filtering it and pretending to be someone you're not.
Absolutely. Since you
Yeah.
brought up women's struggles, one of the things that has brought in a lot of men into to qualify this on BetterHelp. I think I saw 411 clients last year. But what has brought in a lot of men is they're quote in trouble because their wives don't like them watching pornography.
Mm.
Right now, and there's a whole other area of how dopamine and pornography go together and it throws off a person's spouse, but that's not where I'm going with it. Where I'm going with this, you talk about struggles with women, where many women are aware that their partner is watching porn and perhaps masturbating. That seriously injures their sense of attractiveness. If I
Okay.
was attractive enough, he wouldn't be doing that.
Mm.
And you never don't even think of that. I mean, I hadn't thought of that till I actually saw it and talked to some of the partners and found out how they were interpreting it, how it was going through their process.
That is a very unfortunate, yes. And I think it's something that still has to be addressed on the individual level, because I can understand why for some woman thinking if her husband pays more attention to image on front of the screen, whatever that image is, sexual or not, it will appear as a threat unless she has a very strong self-confidence and really confident in her relationship and connection with her husband, so that digital image never even slightly becomes a threat. So I think that's all going into our advice we can give to women or to all our listeners. So if men listen, that's fantastic. We're more than happy to address to them as well. What tools can we give to our listeners they can do every day? Something simple to really help maintain healthy dopamine levels. We're not talking about the spikes, the high you get when you eat chocolate or you watch sports game or you're getting likes or you watching pornography, but more so like the healthy everyday choices. How we can manipulate that beautiful neurotransmitter to maintain good healthy levels in our brain.
I encourage people to become their best possible self. None of us are perfect, but we all have potential.
Yes.
And I mentioned previously the importance of hope and believing that that's possible. Now, the neuroscience research that is so exciting is the research that shows that visually imagined events can affect the dopamine virtually as strongly as real events. So your question is, what can we do every day to kind of boost our level of dopamine? Is if we imagine as if we're seeing it through our own eyes. We're in a situation and we're doing something, work,
Mm-hmm.
school, art, dance, exercise, whatever. And take going to the gym and we're doing the exercise with perfect form and we're doing the requisite number of repetitions and and it's right and it feels good and we feel in our bodies responding, to that sort of effort and our body is developing the area that we've been working on and we're seeing progress and we're seeing that progress even before we see it with our eyes or
Yes.
at work, things that used to be a challenge that we're working on and we're getting through and our boss is pleased with us or we're pleased with our performance. In other words, we are imagining the success. And as we do that, two things are happening. The probability of us succeeding increases. So in real life, our successes follow what we've been visualizing. It's called the teleological effect. We visualize an outcome very vividly. We move toward it unconsciously. We don't have to work at it. We don't have to put effort at it. Our unconscious mind believes, yeah, it's possible. I have hope I can do that. And I move into whatever that vision is. So that's the first thing. Now, some of the other
Mm-hmm.
things are we can cultivate the three C's. And the three C's, if we cultivate the three C's, other people will respond to us more positively. And as other people respond to us more positively, our dopamine levels from normal social interaction go up. And so we do it more often. The dopamine prediction error goes down. It can predict if I interact with people, I will get validation of my attractiveness. That's the three C's that are this. First one is
Mm-hmm.
curiosity. In our
Mm-hmm.
digital age, curiosity about other people has dwindled. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
before everybody had a digital device and there'd be a bunch of people standing around, they'd start interacting with each other. Hey, how's your day going?
Yeah.
What do you do for fun? What do you got for
Yes.
hobbies? Never happens
Yes.
anymore. People just are not present. So the first one in is curiosity. Second one is compassion for people. You know,
Mhm.
we get the idea from looking at digital stuff, people should be perfect. So things in the past, we say, yeah, they have a few quirks. Well, now we judge them for it. They're not perfect.
I really love your recommendations of keeping your curiosity in the human connection. And you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of my son. When he was in the third grade, he decided to do an experiment on his own. Nobody asked him to do it. So he went around his school and asked one question, same question to teachers, students from different grades, different genders. And it's not really experiment that's important, but his final conclusion. And conclusion blew my mind. And now when he's turning into an angry teenager, he's 14 now, I remind him of that conclusion. The conclusion was humans are interesting species and they need to be studied. So that's that level of curiosity, that sincere wonder towards each other. I think that's really what drives dopamine. Because when you look at that other human as of like, wow, that was an interesting reaction, not from the point of anger or criticism or whatever the negative emotion you want to attach to it, but more so, it's usually not personal. It's just whatever happens in that person and that moment, it's okay. And I think that's a fantastic advice and a fantastic thing to kind of keep in your mind in those dark days when you really don't feel like you want to relate to humans,
Uh,
right?
you're absolutely right.
Yes.
That's a great clip. That you explained that. I love it. When I came along in 1963, my first psych class, people were compared to atoms, and we were told every person is different. They're unique, like fingerprints and snowflakes. No two people are alike. But in the 21st century, we're in the quantum age. And so we no longer see people as atoms and cherish their individuality. We see them probably as electrons. And in a digital age, an electron that isn't where it belongs requires a capacitor or something or some rectifier or something to pull it out. And so we expect everybody to be a perfect electron and behave perfectly. And so what we lose in that is we lose our acceptance and that curiosity that your son had. And the next step was compassion. Compassion is what you just demonstrated as you described, listening with curiosity, accepting them for who they are, not judging, and showing unconditional positive regard. That way you can look at people who have done horrendous acts and have compassion for them and have interest in them and judge their acts as bad, but not judge the person. And I learned that many years ago, doing forensic interviews of people who were accused of mass murder or something like that. The acts themselves were horrendous, but the people needed compassion.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
it's
we got
true.
curiosity, compassion, and the third is, believe it or not, potency. So
Hmm.
often we are brusque. We demand. We we aren't grateful when someone does something for us.
Yes.
And so you put those three things, the curiosity to do, and I think your son's study at his age was brilliant. I think he's got a great career ahead in science somewhere. So we got that, curiosity. Compassion is accepting what you find, not trying to change it, not urging people to do this or that, accepting them and valuing and cherishing them for who they are, and then treating everybody with courtesy. If you do those three things, your perceived attractiveness goes up, no matter what your physical appearance is.
Yeah, yeah, I love that advice. That's great. The only thing I can think of back into my chemistry class, if we are all in fact electrons right now in the 21st century, so let's hope we all are neutral noble gas, not the free radical that's tried to bounce around and steal electron from a different molecule, right? Um, but yes, it's unfortunate that in our age, most people do lack that compassion and connection with one another. And that's where this low self-esteem has been propagated really at any age. As much as our podcast is more so for women 40 something struggle with aging, but truly this conversation is to everybody, teenagers, men, women, it doesn't really matter. We all have moments when we kind of struggle with our appearance and struggle with who we are. It's okay occasionally to doubt yourself, but ultimately to get back to those three teachings that you just told us: connection, compassion, and curiosity. And it's ultimately going to create, if not better society, but at least more peace in your own life, right?
And what get more peace in your own life, yeah, and you get comfortable in your own skin, you know. And then when you
Yeah.
get people responding, you'd be amazed if people repeated that experiment that your son did and asked those questions and see people are so starved to have
Yes.
someone take an interest in them.
Yes,
You
very
know,
true. And that for my son experiment, he was blown away how inconsistent people were with their replies to the question. And most people will answer it in a way that he did not predict. And that's why his conclusion was as such: humans are interesting species, because he was expecting, girls to be more cautious and don't give him more of like a risky advice. And then yet some girls did. So that's what really sparked his curiosity in that matter. And I think my son possibly at some point going to be a great psychologist or a therapist, but we'll see where the life takes him. He's still a great listener, so I'll give him that. He's just turning into a little bit of the spiky teenager, which is also normal for that age anyway. All right, well, as we finishing up our conversation, let's share with our listeners how they can find you, Dr. Harig, how they can see your book, your wisdom, where we can find this information.
well, the book is sadly a work in progress. I do have a website, www.relationalcom.com, and I'm always happy to hear from people. Uh, so that would be a hold of me, and information about my book and online courses and all that will be there. And I hope to hear from some of the listeners that might want to know more.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We'll definitely put all this information below. When you listen to this podcast, there will be a website link, and we will provide you with a downloadable ebook or document so you can download all this information at your own pleasure, read through it. And of course, please follow us, listen to more episodes, and check out unveilyou.live platform. We'll be launching soon. And we are so happy you took time out of your day to listen to us. It was a very enlightening conversation. Thank you, Dr. Harig, for joining me today. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Dr. Natalia. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for joining me on Unveiled Radiance. If this episode resonates with you, please share with someone you love, with another woman who might need to hear this information. And for full experience, head to unveilyou.life, where we share everything about skin, hormones, and even self-confidence. Until the next time, thank you for joining me, and please take care of yourself from inside and out.